Today is going to be the first ever all Glasser show. My parents are visiting from Santa Fe, New Mexico now, and pretending that today is Thanksgiving because they very sensibly didn't want to travel on the busiest day of the year. So if you hear some banging around, that would be my lovely wife Ginny downstairs preparing a turkey. Oh, is the music still on?
Music is on, like.
I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention to that. Like I said, it's not easy. If you hear some banging around, that would be my lovely wife, Ginny, preparing a turkey/vegan dinner downstairs, which we will consume immediately after the show. Today's opening music, which went on far too long, was Jupiter, Bringer of Jollity from The Planets by Gustav Holst. A nice classical intro for a change, which sounds all sciencey and stuff. The Atheist Community of Austin is a non-profit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings Sunday mornings at Hot Jumbo Bagel Shop, 307 West 5th Street at 10:30 a.m., except for the first Sunday of each month, when we have our lecture series at 11 a.m. in the Longhorn Room of Furs Cafeteria at North Cross Mall. The next lecture will be, not December 1st. It will be sometime in January, and we don't know what it's about yet. ACA board meetings take place at 10 o'clock right before our regular meetings on the second Sunday of every month. That would be tomorrow. These meetings are open to all ACA members, but you can only vote if you're on the board of directors. Those of you who shop at Randall's can give them our nonprofit organization number, 5158, and have 1% of your purchase donated to the Atheist Community of Austin. The Godless Gamers meet every Monday night here at 7 o'clock p.m. in what Jeff affectionately refers to as Glasser Studios, which is actually my house. ACA Happy Hour takes place at Antonio's near Highway 35 and 183 every Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. If you get there and don't see anyone else, hang around. Lots of people trickle in as the night goes on. For more information, you can call our voicemail at 512-371-2911 or visit their website at www.atheist-community.org. This is a live show. This is usually a live show, but I see from the people in our chat rooms that nothing is happening right now on the Atheist Network. Hang on. What's going on here?
Meanwhile, in other news.
Let's see.
Well, maybe I should.
Hopefully, according to the Winamp player, it says it's playing, but people can't hear it right now. That's okay. For anyone who doesn't hear the show live, you can go to our website, www.atheist-community.org, /radio.htm. Of course, if you can't hear this, then you won't hear the address, but we'll type it into the chat room. National Atheist Ombuds. Any instances of slurs, defamation, or discrimination against atheists or other non-believers in the U.S. media can now be reported to the National Atheist Ombuds by emailing ombuds at atheism.org. Please remember to include as many details as possible and a news source where applicable. Keryn, could you go interact with those people?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Here I am over at the other microphone now. See, Jeff goes away and everything goes all to hell.
There is no hell.
That's true. And we'll actually be talking about Jeff a little bit later. But anyway, let's see. This is an old announcement, but I might as well bring it up anyway. There was a George Carlin show last night. Lots of atheists went, including all of us Glassers. And I don't know. What can we say? George Carlin has his moments, but he didn't do nearly enough bashing of fundamentalists and Republicans. Wouldn't you say so?
Right. It was mostly dirty words.
Yeah, which, I mean, you know, have their place in comedy, but, oh well. Let's see, ACA Solstice Party. This year's winter solstice occurs at 8:14 p.m. Eastern Time. Who wrote this stuff? On December 21st. Stay tuned for news about our upcoming annual solstice party. Need solstice cards? Check out www.heresyhouse.com. Atheist Experience and NonProphets CDs. Now you can collect past episodes of the NonProphets.
What did you want me to type into them?
Just...
Some website?
Sorry. The place where you can hear the replays after the show is www.atheist-community.org. That's EIST. /radio.htm. Org. atheist-community.org /radio.htm. Where was I? You can collect past episodes of the NonProphets and an audio version of our sister show, The Atheist Experience, which airs on public access TV only in Austin, Texas, in convenient CD format. Each CD includes a full month's worth of audio from both shows in both QuickTime and MP3 format, plus extra surprises. The CDs are $5 each. Contact atheist@mac.com for info. Hello, guys.
Hi, guys. Good to be back.
Yes.
Technical difficulties and all.
Yes, well, technically you're not back, but I mean, you're not back because we're not on the air right now.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But anyway, could you hand me that piece of paper there? So here we are, and Jeff, of course, is not here, which leaves me unfree to handle the technical issues. But the reason Jeff is not here is kind of interesting. You see, his parents also happen to be, by coincidence, visiting this month.
This weekend.
Right. This weekend, sorry. And although our dad has been invited to come on the show because he's a lifelong atheist just like us, Jeff's parents are some denomination of Protestant ministers, and he, completely abandoning the courage of his convictions, decided to bow out of the show this week. So it's kind of funny. I should mention that in case you guys haven't heard our history, Dad, you are how many generations?
I think I'm third generation atheist, and that makes you fourth generation.
Right, we're both fourth generation, and downstairs we have Ben, who is potentially a fifth generation atheist. And that's kind of a very different way of growing up than it probably was, because my experience with people in the Atheist Community of Austin and on message boards is that most of them, maybe 80% or so, grew up in religious households and rebelled. But Keryn, you and I never really seem to have rebelled from our parents' so-called religion.
Not so much. Well, as we've discussed in other cultures, in other shows, we grow up both with Judaism and atheism, and well, I don't know about you, but I didn't particularly rebel from either one. I kind of adopted both.
Yeah.
I
love both my parents.
That's true. Dad, what was your experience like growing up?
Well, my parents, I also grew up in a home that was ethnically Jewish, and we knew we were Jewish. We lived in Jewish neighborhoods, but my parents had nothing at all to do with religion. In fact, their favorite way of describing anything having to do with religion was to use the Yiddish word mishigas, which means craziness. We would, while the rest of our communities were solemnly observing Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement, we would go on a drive and have fun. And we were strictly told to not tell our classmates about that. Apart from that, I would say that my parents were among the most unself-conscious atheists I've ever met. They simply never made a fuss over it. They regarded it as the most obvious and natural thing in the world.
That's an interesting distinction.
When I came of age, when I was in high school and college, for example, I didn't really want to take what I had learned from my parents unexamined, so I did a lot of my own reading and thinking. For example, I was strongly influenced by Bertrand Russell and Albert Camus, and eventually kind of reconstructed my childhood beliefs and non-beliefs in a way that I felt comfortable with.
Actually, I went through a similar period when I was worried that I might just be accepting atheism because that's what my parents were. I didn't want to be like those people who never critically examined what they were taught as kids. In fact, you guys sent me to a private school, actually, and they had us read the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, which I can't even remember what religion's holy book that
Hare
is.
Krishna.
No, Hindu.
No.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hindu.
Yes.
Hindu.
Well, I got my Bhagavad Gita from a Hare Krishna group.
Hare Krishna might be an offshoot of Hindu.
It might be, yes.
Yeah. Actually, I can remember a period I went through in college when I did some experimental prayer, just to see how that works. I mean,
please give me a card. Nope, doesn't work. Darn it.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, won't you give me a mercy?
Well, I found that when I prayed for trivial stuff that I could wind up accomplishing myself, like, please help me do well on this test, that, some of the time it worked, because I would do well on the test anyway.
And some of the time it didn't work.
I remember feeling very scientific when I came up with a test to pray for something that was unlikely to happen, but not that difficult to have happen. I prayed that somebody would hand me a cookie for no reason in class. Just give it to me for free, and it didn't happen, so I figured I'd done my part to experiment.
Well, I did a lot, I would say I did a lot more branching out and exploring and experimenting than that, but that segues into a later part of today's show. Mm-hmm. And pertaining to the humanities classes that Russell and I attended when we were kids, but we can save that for later.
You mean in high school?
Yes.
I didn't go to those humanities
You
classes.
Didn't go to humanities classes?
No, I mean, I didn't have them as classes, but we'll get back to those to that subject. Los Alamos, we both went to high school in Los Alamos, and they have a very, what would you say, progressive curriculum. They, one of my favorite teachers actually set up a humanities class, and they had people who were representatives of various religions come all the time and speak to them. We'll get back to that, though.
Okay. We'll get back to that. For now.
Anyway, I'm pleased to say that I've retained my atheism from my family, and I brag about my family all the time because everybody else gripes about how their parents are, how they always have to hide their atheism from their parents. Even Jeff D., who is, the most outspoken atheist that I know. And he doesn't hide his atheism, but he also has to tiptoe around and not go to the radio show, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure he'll be back next week and have some choice words to say about this.
Yeah, that's okay. We forgive him.
Now, on the subject of atheist families, I actually wanted to discuss something, kind of a general misconception that Christians often seem to have about atheists. Mm-hmm. You guys know that I have a morbid fascination with listening to and reading apologetics in books and on the radio, where Christians make arguments about why it's really, really logical to be a Christian. And atheists bother them for some strange reason. People not believing in the same religion that they do is kind of worrying, and they spend a lot of time thinking about what could possibly make a person go so far wrong that they actually don't believe in God.
Bum, bum, bum.
And there's a theory that I've heard floating around there more than once that is kind of interesting to me. I first read about this in Dan Barker's book, Losing Faith in Faith. He's a minister who turned into an atheist. And he mentioned that he was once a guest on the Christian Broadcasting Network on a talk show in 1989 when he was a solidly entrenched atheist. And he was sharing a spotlight with a guy named John P. Coster, who wrote a book called The Atheist Syndrome. And according to Barker, the book characterizes atheism as mental illness. Here's Barker's own words. This is from chapter 38 of his book. Coster's book is nothing more than a personal polemic, invoking his armchair interpretation of the private lives of infidels such as Darwin, Huxley, Ingersoll, Nietzsche, and Freud. Coster asserts that the atheist syndrome has three phases. 1. In childhood, there is suppression by the father. 2. The escape phase in which they separate from fathers at home. 3. The realization that they resemble their fathers. Depression sets in, relieved by anti-religious activity because by attacking their idea of God, they were attacking their own fathers.
Oh.
That totally sounds like us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Didn't they recently do some kind of study that there was some drug they were using for antidepressants or something like that?
Who?
That, I just remember this vaguely coming out in the news, that they were doing tests on it, and, it was some mood-modifying drug, and they were doing tests on it, and the tests revealed that people who take this are more likely to have irrational trains of thought and more likely to believe in religion.
Maybe.
You have to look that up.
I guess they get you when your mind is vulnerable.
Wasn't that kind of proving, though, that belief in God has to do with a chemical imbalance?
I do remember Paul Wilson talking about that. Anyway. I actually heard on the radio recently that this was brought up again. There's a guy named Josh McDowell. He's a lawyer, and he's written a couple of books with names like More Than a Carpenter and Evidence That Demands a Verdict, where he basically claims that he was an atheist for his entire life until he decided to investigate the evidence for the truth of Christianity, and this evidence was so overwhelming that it changed his mind. This is discussed all over the net, and you can see tons of articles which basically pick apart everything in his books. But I heard him come on the radio recently and talk about his own relationship with his father. And he said that basically he was angry at his father and lashed out and basically had completely irrational reasons for turning to atheism in the first place. And I thought to myself, well, no big surprise that he became a Christian again. If he, he claims that there are logical reasons for Christianity, but his thoughts about, his thoughts on both sides don't seem to be based in reason very much. They seem to be based mostly in emotion.
It's kind of like saying that I believe I'm a Christian because my girlfriend is. Not necessarily because you subscribe to the same beliefs. So then if you break up with that girlfriend, then you become an atheist. But then it has nothing to do with whatever you're practicing.
Yeah, and actually I seem to remember that part of the background of him converting back to Christianity was that his wife was a strong Christian, which he left out of the story in previous books. that, you know, he basically said, okay, honey, just for you, I'm going to investigate the truth of Christianity. And what a surprise! He found out it's true.
Wow. I'm in awe.
Anyway, I think that there are different kinds of atheists. I think that the three of us are unlikely ever to convert to Christianity precisely because we do care so much about the logical arguments. And the main thing would be some kind of actual evidence that God exists, and not some kind of, oh, look at him working in my life. You know, I found my car keys after I prayed that
St. Anthony.
Right, St. Anthony.
I think there's another reason, perhaps, why we don't feel compelled to seek something outside of the rational, something religious, and that's because, in fact, we have had a very satisfying family life, and we don't feel compelled to look for something that's missing in our lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, I think that calls to attention the fact that there really are some people who think of themselves as atheists because they had rotten family lives. And they think that they're representative of real atheists. But in fact, we're completely different atheists. We're completely different types of atheists than someone like Josh McDowell. And I don't think... He thinks that he understands how we think, but he really doesn't.
Yeah. Hear, hear.
Well, is that about all we could squeeze out of that one?
I think so.
Okay. What do we got? Okay, well, let's get to some news of this week. Let's see. I understand that Michael Newdow still has some updates going on regarding his Pledge of Allegiance lawsuit.
Yes, here's an item that says, judges decide father has right to challenge pledge in court. A federal appeals panel in San Francisco ruled yesterday that the atheist father who challenged the Pledge of Allegiance on behalf of his daughter had a right to bring the case. In its ruling, the panel reaffirmed its view that allowing schoolchildren to hear the words "under God" in the pledge amounts to unconstitutional indoctrination. The action clears the way for the possible reconsideration by the full appellate court, the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, of the panel's June decision that the phrase "under God" in the pledge violates the First Amendment. The three-judge panel held that Michael A. Newdow of Sacramento, who filed the suit on behalf of himself and his 8-year-old daughter, may proceed with it over the objection of the girl's mother, Sandra Banning of Elk Grove, who has sole legal custody and has described herself as a Christian. In September, a family court judge in Sacramento, James Mize, ordered Mr. Newdow not to argue the federal case on his daughter's behalf. Yesterday's decision concerned whether he could proceed on his own behalf. The federal court held that Mr. Newdow and other parents who have lost custody of their children maintain the right to expose and educate their children to their individual religious beliefs, even if those religious views contradict those of the custodial parent or offend her. The case gained wide attention in June with the ruling that Mr. Newdow's daughter should not be subjected to the phrase "under God" being recited in her public elementary classroom. The Constitution, the court says, prohibited public schools or other governmental bodies from endorsing religion. A day after the ruling, after Congress and President Bush condemned it, the judges delayed the decision's effect. In addition to California, the ruling would have barred the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance in 8 other states that the appeals court covers: Alaska, Arizona, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon,
Sorry about
and Washington.
this for people who are listening to the rebroadcast. Just checking something. Anyway, go on.
That's the end of that story.
Oh, okay. So things are looking good for Michael Newdow and not so good for
his wife.
Right.
And President Bush.
And people who really like hearing "Under God" every time the Pledge of Allegiance is read. Let's see. Can you tell us anything about Roy Moore?
Oh, yes. That's mine again.
Yes.
Attorneys asked Chief Justice to pay $704,000 in legal fees in Commandments case. Montgomery, Alabama. Attorneys who won a federal court order for Alabama's Chief Justice to remove a Ten Commandments monument from the state's judicial building have asked for $704,000 in legal fees and expenses. A motion filed in federal court Monday asks U.S. District Judge Myron Thompson to approve the payments for the work of 6 attorneys during a 7-day trial and for more than a year's preparation. Thompson ruled that the 5,300-pound granite monument to the Ten Commandments is unconstitutional and gave Chief Justice Roy Moore 30 days to remove it. Moore, who had the monument moved into the rotunda last year, has said he plans to appeal the ruling. Moore has said the money to fight the lawsuit would come out of his pocket or from his supporters. But Ayesha Khan, one of the plaintiff's attorneys, said Tuesday she expects Moore will ask the Senate to pay the $704,000.
Serves him right, I'd say.
Tom Parker, a spokesman for Moore, called the amount outrageous. This case has been a personal vendetta against Chief Justice Moore from the beginning, Parker said. The outrageous amount that the plaintiffs are requesting is evidence of just how much they are willing to spend in pursuit of their agenda. Khan, chief counsel for the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, said the amount is reasonable. This is a complicated case, Khan said. She said Moore's lawyers used tactics that required us to spend more hours than anticipated.
I think that's enough of that one.
Where does that price come from? I mean, when they sue him for having a plaque up about the Ten Commandments, where does money come in?
They had to sue him a whole bunch of times and pay lawyers' fees for it.
Okay.
And I mean, they didn't have to sue him just once, because they sued him, and the judge basically ordered that, yeah, you have to take the monument out of this courthouse, and he basically said, no, come and take me away if you want, which I think would be a great idea at this point.
Did they not do that?
No, they seem to have sued him again.
No, I mean, so they take him to court, and the court, the legal court of the United States, or whatever group this is, says
what
you're
court
guilty.
Was it?
I don't know.
We don't know.
Doesn't really matter.
I don't remember.
They say you're guilty. You have to take this plaque down, and he says no, and they didn't enforce anything?
Well, they ordered him to take it out. I think that might have been their first mistake.
Yeah.
It's a lot like all those. It's a lot like all those cases of abuse in the Catholic Church, where basically their response to it has been to say, well, you are responsible for policing your own priests, instead of actually going to the real police and having some of these people arrested. Because it's religion, it's special, and you can't touch it. Well, here's another religion thing that they can touch, and that people are picking apart as we speak. This is a story that's been going on for a few weeks, actually, but but we haven't really been covering it, and there's more people talking about it now than there were before. So, Keryn?
Well, since we haven't really been talking about it, I guess a little bit of the background on it is that somebody found a box of bones.
Right.
And this box of bones said allegedly...
An ossuary.
It's an ossuary, a box full of bones, and the inscription on the box of bones they believed was in Aramaic that said
Here lies brother of, or son of Joseph, brother of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as we said a few weeks ago on the show, even if this turned out to be, even in the extremely unlikely case that this turned out to be authentic, and it turned out to be that James, brother of Jesus, and it lent historical credibility to the idea that there really was a person named Jesus. That still wouldn't mean that he walked on water.
Yes.
So it's not that big a deal. But
I think it's highly likely that there was a very nice philosopher named Jesus Christ who went around and did whatever he did. But
yeah, now see, I'm not really sure if that's true or not, because I've heard some convincing arguments that Jesus was actually a myth that rose up out of sort of a mishmash of a bunch of other legends.
Interesting.
Including Mithraism, which coincidentally, was around for hundreds of years before, and coincidentally shared a whole lot of features like virgin birth and coming back from the dead and things like that.
I guess I've always just kind of found it, not easy. Well, never mind. Anyway, so what they've found is, since this box was discovered was that people who specialize in penmanship thought that part of it was a forgery, and second of all, they couldn't decide if it was written in Hebrew or Aramaic. But this story says it's called "Experts Question Authenticity of Bone Box for Brother of Jesus," quote unquote. Skeptics in growing numbers are weighing in with doubts about the authenticity of the inscription on a burial box that may have contained the bones of James, a brother of Jesus, and so could be the earliest surviving archaeological link to Jesus Christ. When the existence of the limestone box or ossuary was announced 5 weeks ago, a French scholar asserted that the inscription, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, most preferably referred to the Jesus of the New Testament. The script, he said, was in the style of the Aramaic language of the 1st century A.D. Now, more experts have studied photographs of the inscription or seen it on display at a Toronto museum. They generally accept the antiquity of the ossuary itself, but some of them suspect that all or part of this script is a forgery. Apparent differences in the handwriting, they said, suggest that the Jesus phrase in particular could have been added by a forger, either in ancient or modern times. To say the least, quotes Dr. Eric M. Myers, an archaeologist and a scholar of the Judaic studies at Duke University, I have a very bad feeling about the matter. He said this recently at a conference of biblical and archaeological researchers in Toronto. Dr. Myers said he had serious questions about the authenticity, in no small part because the origin of the ossuary is clouded in mystery. It was apparently found by looters at an undisclosed site and bought on the antiquities market in Israel. Professional archaeologists are not comfortable with artifacts of such dubious provenance. Others who had just examined the ossuary at the Royal Ontario Museum were most concerned with the encryption being that the encryption appeared to be written by two different hands. The first part about James, son of Joseph, seemed to be written in formal script, while the second part about Jesus is in a more free-flowing cursive style.
So basically, the bottom line here is the James, son of Joseph part might be real,
might be authentic,
but the
other part
is fake.
Was written in.
Well, what occurs to me is that even if the James part, son of Joseph, is correct, Jesus was, of course, not the son of Joseph. According to the Bible, he was the son of God.
Well, he was the adopted son of Joseph.
As far as Jesus was concerned, Joseph was a mere bystander.
Well, he was still the half-brother of Joseph.
Okay.
Which, I'm sure they didn't make that many. Half-brother of James.
Yes.
So I'm sure they didn't make that big a deal about the distinction.
Okay. And so that's an update on that story.
Okay. see. I have a story. We like to often seek out stories which are not about Christianity, just to show that we think all religions are equally wacky.
Here.
And there's something kind of sad and kind of humorous going on in India. What's happening is they're running out of girls. This particular story opens up in the state of Haryana, and says a fertile farming state just west of New Delhi, Haryana produces a smaller share of girls relative to overall births than almost anywhere in India. The 2001 census found just 820 girls for every 1,000 boys under age 6.
Yikes.
Down from 879 in 1991. And guess why this is happening?
Why is this happening, Russell?
Oh, come on, guess.
I might guess.
Oh, please, go ahead.
The tradition and the religion of that region favor boys over girls so strongly that they engage in infanticide.
That is exactly right.
And they have been so effective at skewing the balance between boys and girls that the boys of that region are having serious trouble finding enough girls, or at least they will when they get old enough to be interested.
Wow. I see in the chat room that we are back online now, and for those of you who are just joining us now, this is the first ever all Glasser show in which we have myself, Keryn Glasser.
Hi, welcome to the show.
Again. And and Dr. Alan Glasser here.
Hi there.
That's my father. And he's visiting this weekend. Anyway, I'm going on with this story now. The lopsided sex ratio reflects the spread of modern medical technology, particularly ultrasound exams, which allow Indian couples to indulge a cultural preference for sons by using abortions to avoid having girls.
Well, at least the medical science makes it possible to do this as an abortion before the child is born,
right,
rather than infanticide after the child is born, which is the traditional method.
But the medical science doesn't seem to be telling them that they're idiots for valuing girls less than boys, which somebody really ought to sit down and explain to them. The situation in Haryana has become so desperate that some parents are not only dropping their demands for wedding dowries, a tradition that still has a wide following in India, but are offering a bride price to families of prospective mates for their sons. That's what I'll try, said Palarwal, adding that he is prepared to offer up to 25,000 rupees, which I formerly thought only existed in The Legend of Zelda. About $520 in equivalent U.S. currency, to the family of the right girl. Even if the girl is squint-eyed, I will get my son married, he said. While Haryana is an extreme case, the trend is also visible at the national level, where the number of girls under 6 declined from 945 for every 1,000 boys in 1991 to 927 in 2001. Some of the sharpest declines have occurred in the most prosperous areas of the country, including wealthy neighborhoods in New Delhi, where couples have the wherewithal to practice sex-selective abortion, and the pressure from their parents to produce sons is often acute. You know, there's a big problem with people having access to technology, and to technology that somebody else invented, and not the brains to use it correctly.
Well, there's a big problem with people having access to technology without taking into consideration the consequences of their actions. I mean, I think that's a big problem with religion is that the consequences that they take into consideration never have anything to do with the people that they're sharing their lives with, but the people that they'll share their death with. I mean, it always has to do with an afterlife, and then I mean, like the Osama bin Laden thing, like going and killing thousands and thousands of people in the United States so that they'll go on to heaven. And
no, I don't think he thought they'd go to heaven. They're infidels.
No, not they'll go to heaven. No,
the people.
Yeah. And it doesn't have anything to do with what happens on the planet Earth. But, I mean, this story, they're so concerned about how, God and the afterlife and whatever is involved in this will look at their family if they're all men.
I don't think it's a question of how God views them so much as a fact that men are valued citizens in the society and women are property, which is promoted by a lot of religions. But in today's modern world, you would think that most places in the world no longer promote it as obviously as they do over there in India.
But then this could actually prove to be a good thing, because if it becomes such a dire issue that people can't even keep their families alive, then it might actually work to reverse the whole process, and women will become more highly valued.
It's kind of a self-correcting problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're talking supply and demand here. Women are the supply of stuff.
That's wonderful. I mean, if you've got... Hey, now.
It doesn't address the root problem, though, which is that women are not human.
Well, maybe they'll figure out that women really are human, or that they need women to survive whether or not women are... I don't know. But, I mean, if their population starts to suffer, then... I mean, they're already saying that they no longer require a dowry, which is really so that these women that nobody wants, right?
To get a bride.
These women that nobody wants has to pay a lot of money, in order to be accepted into a person's family, because it's a burden for them to accept a woman into their family, so they need a fee for it. But now, the men are offering huge tracts of land instead of the women.
Huge tracts of land.
Huge tracts of land.
Perhaps eventually the families will decide that what they really want are girls because they're more profitable.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about a population suffering, really, I think I remember Russell and I having this conversation at Disneyland like 5 years ago, but men, I mean, men can sleep with as many women as they want in order to populate the earth, but a woman can only get pregnant once every 9 months at most.
Well, yes, it's psychological Darwinism, or no, the other way around. Evolutionary psychology.
Yes, that's why we need more women.
Which, actually, I was inspired to read about because it was in Dad's library. Thanks.
My pleasure.
Anyway, let me see if I should just wrap up this story. But they mention even the bride shortage. This is Richa Tanwar, director of women's studies at Kurukshetra University in Haryana, or whatever. Says, but even the bride shortage is not going to change things in the society. The attitude is, okay, let the neighbors have daughters. I still want my sons. Men in the village are under no illusions about the reason for the bride shortage. They speak of the latest census data and its relationship to illegal sex determination tests. Oh, I didn't mention using medical tests to determine the sex of a fetus at all is now illegal in India, precisely because of this problem.
Good.
But it's been illegal for a while, and people are ignoring it.
Mm-hmm.
Men in the village... let's see. Everyone's very stubborn about only wanting sons, said Mahendra Singh, 54, the village council member, who has 3 daughters and 2 sons. They don't realize that this is going to affect society. People just assume that if a daughter is born, it's a thing to mourn. Almost in the next breath, though, he revealed his own conflicting feelings on the subject. I regret that I didn't sterilize earlier, he said. Then I wouldn't have had as many daughters. So...
He almost had it.
So close, and yet so wrong. Okay, well, that's enough news for now. Let's get back to the subject of humanities classes.
Okay, back to the subject of humanities classes.
I was saying earlier that Los Alamos High School was very progressive and offered a humanities course in which throughout the year they would bring in representatives of various different religions.
I'd like to interject something here.
Oh, please.
I would not say that Los Alamos High School was uniformly enlightened.
Yes.
I was somewhat horrified when I learned at the end of the year of biology class that my son was taking that they had skipped a chapter on evolution.
Yes, I remember that.
The turkey who was teaching that class,
Mr. Max,
protested to me that he hadn't had time. And I told him that biology without evolution is mere butterfly collecting.
What do you mean he didn't have time? He had 150 years. I remember specifically that I hated biology in high school and thought it was butterfly collecting, basically. It was sitting up late at night with Mom, memorizing random facts. And you said, wait until you get to evolution, then it'll all come together and make sense. And we got there, and they skipped it.
Yeah. So I taught it to my son. It's a very simple and obvious thing to teach, and he has been a Darwin fan ever since.
Yeah. I read Richard Dawkins. Actually, I'm listening to a Stephen Jay Gould book right now. But anyway, they had this humanities class, and they had representatives of various different groups, including atheists, and their yearly atheist talk is given by you.
Yes. In fact, when the humanities class was first being set up, I asked who he was having for this religion sequence, this comparative religion part. And I volunteered to be his token atheist, and I've been doing it ever since. I believe this will be my 12th year coming up.
Yeah, and you get a lot of positive feedback on that, don't you?
Yeah, I certainly get my share of children in the class writing to me that I will burn in hell for all eternity, but I also get some very rewarding comments from kids who say that this is the first they've heard such views discussed intelligently, and it was an eye-opener. So you meet all kinds, and I make it clear that I am not trying to proselytize my point of view, but rather just explain how I think and let them draw their own conclusions.
I'll bet that in itself is refreshing, because I bet when the fundamentalist comes in, he doesn't tell them that, oh, well, this is just my opinion, you can have your own. Do you know the fundamentalists? I mean, do you know the other people who give the talks at Los Alamos?
I know probably two of them. One of them is a fellow who actually helped instruct my son for his bar mitzvah. There's a contradiction.
That would be me.
Yes, that's Jack Schlachter, a very fine friend of mine and physicist whom I have great respect for. He would represent the Jewish beliefs. There's another very interesting case, a scientist at Los Alamos who does computer simulation of tectonic motions of the Earth and is at the same time a fundamentalist Christian who believes in the young Earth point of view and denies that. He's a creationist. So I've heard him speak, and he is remarkably knowledgeable about modern science, and yet finds ways to have room for his fundamentalist beliefs.
So,
well,
that's surprising, actually. What kind of science does he do?
Well, the surprising thing is that he is a very capable computational physicist who does computer modeling of tectonic motions of the Earth that cause continental drift. These, of course, occur in most people's beliefs on a time scale of hundreds of millions of years and are directly involved in the details of the evolution of life. For example, one piece of evidence for continental drift is that some of the fossils in South Africa exactly match up with some of the fossils in southern Africa because they were once part of the same continent. I have heard him give a talk on science, including his own, to a fundamentalist Christian group in Los Alamos, and I could tell you that he finds uncertainties and ambiguities in what science understands today, and he gives each of these ambiguities his own spin to make it come out in support of his fundamentalist views.
So he actually manages to spin this stuff so that this stuff that supposedly happened in millions of years only happened within 6,000?
I think so. In fact, there are uncertainties in the fundamental constants that govern the Earth's tectonic motions, and he has found it possible to run his computer simulations in such a way that they all get done in a couple of thousand years.
Boy, that's an extreme amount of, fudging something.
The fact is that, I'm a scientist myself, and as such, I recognize that science is necessarily and always incomplete. Unlike religion, we don't claim to have any final answers. All we claim is that we keep on learning more, and our knowledge becomes more and more complete as time goes on. And it is possible at any given point in the evolution of science to freeze it there and say, well, we don't understand these things, and we will interpret all of the unknowns in favor of fundamentalist Christianity.
What were you going to say, Keryn?
Well, going back to the humanities class that we were talking about, as my dad said, he doesn't, when you open up the class, what were you saying about not proselytizing, not trying to convert anybody, just being informative?
I merely explain to people what my beliefs are and let them draw their own conclusions.
So as opposed to Russell, see, I was much younger than Russell, of course, and every year that my dad would, Dad would give this talk, I would come to the school for a day and listen to it.
Right. I was a senior when he first started doing the class, and I wasn't taking that class, so I just showed up for that one day, I think.
But I got to listen to the talk every year, and then when I was a junior in high school, I took the class. And it was a very good class, and I think they did a really, really good job with it. Basically, the humanities class lasted the entire year, and a third of the class was devoted completely towards religion. So the whole year wasn't devoted to religion, but a third of the class was devoted to a religion, and every week or so they would bring in speakers from various different religions, and I thought they did a really good job of it. And they give a little demonstration and a little talk about what their religion is about, where they come from, and what they do, and then they open up like half of the class period to the students to ask questions to them, and I really got a lot out of it. I don't remember feeling proselytized to at all, or preached to, or I didn't feel like anybody was trying to convert me.
Even the other speakers.
Even the other speakers. Uh-huh. There was a fundamentalist Christian. There was a Baptist.
Catholic.
I can't remember how many different sects of Christianity they did. I remember a Wiccan. I remember a Sikh, and I thought Sikh was a fascinating religion. I give props to any religion that preaches vegetarianism. And I found that, there were a lot... most of the religions out there in the world, and I'm going to have to, I don't want to bash Christianity, but I'm going to have to say most of the non-Christian religions out there in the world have some really interesting foundations and some really interesting practices, and are all based on, and are very frequently based on some very good concepts. And there's always people that can go and screw up those concepts and make them evil, but it did...
I don't know, some of the concepts are evil to begin with. I mean,
what?
Hell.
No. See, that's why I said most of the non-Christian religions. I don't want to target Christianity, but I thought a lot of the non-Christian religions were very...
I have a feeling that, what would you say about Islam? Would you call that a Christian religion?
I don't know.
it is, I guess, technically an offshoot of Christianity in that it
only in the same sense that Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism.
Yeah, which is a legitimate sense, actually.
The Christians claim that the Jews had part of the answer, but not the whole thing, and that Jesus completed it.
So.
And then, of course, the Muslims claim that the Christians and Jews had partial answers, and it was completed by Muhammad.
Right, and so do the Mormons. They have the same kind of thing. Do they have any Mormons at the humanities class?
I'm not aware.
Yes.
But they certainly have plenty of Mormons.
They have tons.
They have plenty of Mormons among the scientists at Los Alamos.
You know, actually, I can't remember if they did, because I remember meeting a Mormon later on in college, and he described his religion to me, which was nothing I'd ever heard of before. So either he believed something entirely different than I'd ever heard about Mormonism, or they didn't have a class. It was a long time ago. I can't remember that far back. I was just a kid then.
You were saying there's tons of Mormons in Los Alamos?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's true.
There's actually tons of a lot of religions in Los Alamos.
Yes.
Los Alamos has one of the largest concentrations of churches of any town I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Now that is so weird, because Los Alamos is pretty much a science town. I mean, it was founded for the express purpose of building the lab, right?
Well, building the bomb.
Yeah, well, yeah. But, I mean, the whole town has basically grown up around the industry of doing science.
That's right.
Destructive or otherwise.
There was a very, very small population of that plateau before the war and the establishment of the lab.
And I would say just about everybody at the high school has at least one parent working at the lab.
Yeah. The town has perhaps the largest concentration of PhDs of any town in the United States, and it also has probably the largest per capita circulation of the public library of any town in the United States.
Yeah, so, I mean...
But I knew a lot of Mormons.
It seems like all those churches sort of sprung up almost as a as a backlash against all the science going on.
I mean, I do find that many scientists retain their religions, and for reasons that are mysterious to me, that they don't see a conflict between their beliefs in science on the one hand and their beliefs in
there just
religion.
Aren't that...
I think many people have a kind of a compartmentalized mind where they don't apply the same standards of rigor and logic to their religious beliefs as they do to their scientific beliefs.
This actually brings to mind an essay that the late, great Douglas Adams, he had an interview with American Atheists, and they were asking him how he became an atheist. He said, sort of the biggest thing about being an atheist in England is that, it's not that they're shocked that you're an atheist, it's that they're shocked that you have strong opinions about anything. But he also went on to say that he was brought up basically believing that you can submit things to logical rigor and testing and things, and study them and pick them apart. But when it comes to religion, there's sort of a wall there where you're not allowed to touch that. And he said a great revelation for me was that you could actually submit the arguments of religion to the same kind of testing as everything else, and the reason they're shielded from that is because they're so damn silly that they don't stand up to it.
Bertrand Russell was an interesting case. For those who haven't already heard, I named my son Russell after him.
Oh yes.
Bertrand Russell. I think he was born in 1870. 1872, that's right. And his parents were both free thinkers and very active in government and in socialist circles. But they both died, I think one before he was born and the other shortly after, and he was given to his grandmother, who was a fundamentalist Christian. So she tried to bring him up as a Christian. By the time he was about 8 years old, he started questioning this. He started maintaining a diary of his thoughts about the subject, and he realized that he would get into trouble if he were found to be questioning these things, and so he kept it in a kind of a code. He wrote it out phonetically in Greek letters so that people shouldn't understand what he was thinking. This was when he was 8 years old.
Okay. By the way, since you brought up Douglas Adams, a minute ago, I have acquired a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on DVD if we want to have a movie night at my place.
Oh, I would love that.
Like next Saturday night or something.
I haven't really heard how good the movie is.
I haven't heard how good it is either. No. Is it a movie or a TV series?
TV series, that's it.
From like the 80s?
I heard the TV series was kind of good. But before Douglas Adams died, he was supposedly working on a deal to actually get a movie off the ground because he said he was waiting for the technology to catch up with him.
Awesome. That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Is it died out, or are they still working on it?
I don't know. Let's see. Well, we're actually moving along pretty nicely. It's 3 o'clock now, so I'm going to actually skip some of these topics if you guys don't mind.
Oh, wait. Do I get to read the comic?
Oh, do you want to read the comic?
I want to read the comic. It's just fun.
Very fun.
Pow, splat, take that, you Darwin disparagers. Your species will make perfect slaves for our dung mines, gloats Corgu, the giant purple space beetle.
This is from the New York Times, by the way.
Wielding a glinting dagger in one hairy insect claw. Come out and fight, you frail little thing. Let survival of the fittest decide this planet's fate. The old man, clutching a wooden staff, bravely stands his ground. You fiend, he shrieks, we'll fight you to the bitter end. It could be a scene from the latest Tolkien movie, except that in this case, the bearded ancient routs his opponent not with Gandalfian magic, but with science. Do you have any children? The old man thunders. Corgu leans in for the kill. Flustered, the beetle confesses he has none. Well, in that case, Corgu, I win. His adversary declares, I may be an old fellow, but I've had several children. Evolutionary fitness isn't a measure of physical prowess, you chitinous cretin. Chitinous cretin. It's an index of reproductive success. In fact, until we hear the pitter-patter of baby Corgus, your fitness will remain a big fat 0. The defeated beetle scuttles off, presumably to attend to the urgent business of procreation. And the old man continues on his walk. So it goes in the pro-evolution comic book world dreamed up by Jay Holzer, a biology professor at Juniata College in Huntington, PA.
Pennsylvania.
I have so many problems with that every time. As a way of combating the creepy influence of creationism and the incorporation of intelligent design into school curricula. Intelligent design is creationism, Mr. Holzer grumbles in a telephone interview. They have taken a dirty word and made it sound scientific-y. And in his goofily inventive Sandwalk Adventures series, which made its debut last December, he's having none of it. Here, Charles Darwin is a superhero. Evolutionary theory is his powerful, if difficult to draw, secret weapon. And Mara, a talking follicle mite living in his eyebrow, is his willing, if misinformed, acolyte, determined to understand his ideas. The fanciful sequence involving a purple space beetle is something Mara dreamed up to explain Darwinian theory to her bored and skeptical family. In 4 slim black and white installments published over the last year, the 5th and final one is to arrive in comic book stores next month, and by March the entire series will be available as a single volume. I guess that's enough. That was just fun.
I'd like to have that.
Me too. We should get one and add it to the library.
Jeff's missing, but it would warm his heart to know that we have a backpedalphilia story this week. I know some of us find those distasteful and not that fun to talk about, but go ahead.
Okay, Bishop seeks immunity.
Oh, wait, before you start, hold it. Just wanted to read a great comment from the chat room. It was a quote from Douglas Adams. He said, this is Quill of Numenor, quoting Douglas Adams, who said, "Getting a script made into a movie in Hollywood is like trying to cook a steak by having a series of people enter a room and breathe on it." Anyway, go on.
Okay. Bishop seeks immunity in abuse cases. Phoenix. Bishop Thomas O'Brien, facing a still vague and seemingly remote threat of criminal indictment, announced Thursday that he will speak only with the county attorney or grand jury if he is granted immunity from prosecution. The announcement came during a frenetic day in which, for the second time this week, a Roman Catholic priest was indicted involving sex crimes, and new evidence emerged that O'Brien may have transferred known molesters from parish to parish. If the county attorney wants to speak with Bishop O'Brien, we can't advise him to do that without an assurance of immunity, said O'Brien's attorney, Michael Manning. A week ago, that assurance would not have been necessary, but the county attorney has rattled the saber of criminal indictment, and that changes everything. Maricopa County Attorney Rick Romley said earlier this week that O'Brien could face criminal charges if prosecutors found evidence that the bishop covered up crimes, failed to report abuse, or obstructed justice. A lawyer would have to be a moron to let his client speak without immunity after a county attorney goes and tells however many million people there are in this valley that he is considering bringing an indictment, Manning said.
So just the latest string in a series of priests who are allowed to get away with stuff and not get any punishment from anyone.
See, now wait, in my defense, I don't think we don't need to read that story because it's distasteful, because of course it's distasteful, and that's why we bring it up. I just think it's old news, you know?
It's always old news.
A priest in Phoenix committed pedophilia. A priest in Georgia committed pedophilia.
So what else is
there? A
there?
priest in Texas. Yeah, we get it.
I think Jeff's point in being so interested in this subject is that it's continuous and ongoing, and it never stops. And if we let it become just background noise in the news every week, then basically we're complying and letting them get away with it. Just because it sounds the same as last week when yet another priest gets convicted of child abuse doesn't mean that it's not just as horrific as it was last week. Anyway, I'm for fewer pedophilia news stories in the news, but let's see. We have a couple more news stories to go through, and then we'll give a brief preview of what's going to happen when Dad goes on the TV show tomorrow. Okay, this one is short and kind of funny. Italian Catholics. What are they up to?
Yes. Disgruntled Catholics have come a step closer to washing off holy water they were baptized in as tiny children. Upon request, priests in Italy must note alongside baptism information the wills of adults to leave the Roman Catholic Church. Bowing to pressure from lobby groups who call the act unchristening, the Italian Bishops' Conference recently outlined the procedure.
So I guess you could say they're all going and getting debaptized.
Yes, right. They have baptizing towels, I guess.
They wipe off the holy water.
Yes, right.
Go on.
Okay. Both sides disagree on the scope of the phenomenon. One activist group claims 10,000 people have presented unchristening requests. The church says it is trying to do right by a few dozen people who wish not to be counted as Catholics. Statistics, however, show a large number of slumbering or disinterested members of the country's predominant religion. Almost 98% of Catholics are baptized, only 36% attend Mass regularly, and over 14% never at all, according to 1999 data from Italian National Statistical Institute.
Yeah, and this is kind of funny because as Jeff or maybe Vic has mentioned in the past, when Christians want to claim that they're that they're in power because they have this many members, they count among their numbers people who aren't really practicing Catholics or Christians or Protestants or whatever they are. I mean, basically if you walk into a church and you ever sign your name on something, or you get baptized when you're a baby and which you can't really say is of your own free will, and then you become an atheist later, you're still a Catholic. I mean, they still consider you to be part of their church forever.
Once a Catholic,
that's
always
really
a Catholic.
Interesting, because they used to be so quick to excommunicate people that, diss them.
They're desperate.
They are desperate. Maybe this is a good thing, if they're getting so desperate that they're making exceptions for anyone.
Once a Catholic, always a Catholic. But once a night's enough.
but it seems like they're selective about how they want to report their numbers, because sometimes they want it to sound like, oh, well, see, this is a Christian nation because 90% of Americans are Christian, and sometimes they want to appear that they're a persecuted minority. So when they're a persecuted minority, then they fudge the numbers in the other direction. It's hilarious that they think they're a persecuted minority. I mean, just listen to the radio and see how. Well, how many atheist shows do you hear?
Well, that just might mean that they're more vocal than we are. But I mean, if the fact is that when we consider them a Christian nation or all over the place, they are counting all these people that don't practice anymore and have broken all of the commandments and whatever. I mean, which, earlier they would have excommunicated them like that for breaking any of the commandments. Now people break all of them. Then maybe they're actually dying out and there aren't actually that many of them left.
I don't know. Anyway.
We can only hope.
One of the ways that Christians try to abuse this idea of, well, we're in the majority, so, majority rules, it's a democracy, is this perpetual sneaking religion into classroom issue, which surprisingly enough is not just an American issue, it's actually happening in England too, but there's a twist. What's going on?
Scientology could be taught in schools.
Oh my.
Is that the right one, or
yes.
is that... Okay, woohoo! Go Scientology! Scientologists want children in Camden schools to be taught their beliefs as part of the new curriculum. And the controversial group, which counts Hollywood stars Tom Cruise and John Travolta among its supporters, also wants pupils to learn about the teachings of the Moonies and pagans during religious education lessons, which when the new school curriculum is introduced in 2003. The movement, founded in the 1950s by late American eccentric L. Ron Hubbard, has never had formal religious status in the UK, but members of the Camden branch, based in Tottenham Court Road for 35 years, believe Scientology, along with other smaller groups, should be given the same exposure as Catholicism and Protestantism at GCSE and A level. Camden's Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education, which includes Church of England representatives, head teachers, chancellors, and school governors, is now set to consider the request after 2 members of the Camden branch presented the council with a book on the movement on Tuesday. Scientologist Paul Dolan, who was at the meeting, said, "We are asking SACRE, S-A-C-R-E, to think of introducing other religious communities into the new school curriculum for religious education."
Well, this is the dilemma that the religious right faces when they want to stick their indoctrination in our educational curriculum. Because we have a constitution that says that the government cannot promote a particular religion. So in order to get around that, they have to say, well, we're not promoting a particular religion. We're just, promoting a good feeling about God in general.
Right.
But if they want to put their money where their mouth is, somebody's going to call them on it and say, okay, instead of a fundamentalist thing in our school, why not put a Scientology thing in?
They've really opened up a can of worms here. I mean, they're talking about it's really extended religious tolerance of groups such as ourselves, the Unification Church, the Moonies, the Unitarians, the Quakers, and the Paganists.
Some of those are lunatics and some aren't.
Are they going to let atheists speak too?
They must. They have to. They're going to have to. This is going to be a really, really long class if they're going to give equal time to how many religions exist in the world. Do we know? Do we have any idea?
Millions. Tens or hundreds of thousands, something like that. Actually, I would say that there exist 6 billion religions in the world. Each person has something completely different.
There you go.
They just tend to fall in convenient categories.
It's going to be a very extensive class.
Well, we're down to a little over 5 minutes. I'd like to talk about what's going to happen on the TV show tomorrow. For those of you who are here in Austin, tune into Channel 10 tomorrow at 4:30. I've been away from the TV show for so long. Dad's going to be on the show, and he's going to be bringing up a topic which he's hoping that is going to be an all-atheist
Dad's going to be on the show. Dr. Alan Glasser.
Dr. Alan Glasser, esteemed physicist from Los Alamos National Laboratories.
Esteemed computational and theoretical plasmaphist from Los Alamos National Laboratories.
Why don't you just tell us what you're doing?
Okay, I want to bring up a point that bothers me. This is actually a point that I think we atheists need to discuss among ourselves and see if we could come to some clarification.
And on the light
we're going
note,
to ditch the Christian callers for a change.
Yeah. What was troubling me is that I see a difficulty in my own and fellow atheists' set of beliefs, which I don't know how to resolve, and so I'm going to put it to my fellow atheists to help me out. The problem is that as atheists, we look to our own introspection and our own reason to decide questions of value that matter to us and questions of morality, right and wrong, good and bad. We rely on introspection into our own feelings to decide what's good and what's not. For the most part, we assume that in looking inside ourselves like this and balancing the good of the individual and the good of the society, that most of us come to similar conclusions, and this is why we think it should be possible to arrive at a mutually satisfactory morality. Unfortunately, there are individuals such as Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden who look inside themselves and find that their highest priority is killing Jews or infidels. How do we deny this? How do we say that we're right and they're not?
Well, there's not.
Yeah. Is it a matter of majority rule? If we were to subject ourselves to majority rule, we would find that the majority in America would rule out atheism. if it's a matter of might makes right, that we don't like what you're saying and we're going to destroy you, well, what if they destroy us? Is there a rational basis for deciding which things we find unacceptable and which things we're willing to discuss?
Greatest good for the greatest number?
I don't know the answer to this.
That has its own problems, actually.
I don't know the answer to this. I genuinely need your input, and I hope that you'll call in tomorrow and help us out.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're not in Austin and you'd like to put some input into this subject, can I give out your email address?
Okay.
Are you sure?
I guess so.
Okay, it's ahg@lanl.gov. Well, we've still got a few more minutes. Got any thoughts on this subject?
On morality?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm a vegan. Let's talk about that.
Personally,
no, let's go have some turkey instead.
Yes. What was it that somebody once said about the Torah, that everything is commentary?
No. It was the golden rule. The Torah basically says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The rest is commentary, I think.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. But the problem is defining who others are. I mean, I happen to feel that others includes all people but not turkeys. Whereas you think it includes turkeys, and Adolf Hitler doesn't think it includes Jews.
Or people with disabilities, or people with blue eyes, or people...
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the so-called golden rule is an axiom. It's, it's your starting point, but you have to define who it applies to. What do you think about that?
I think that's too simplistic, and we need the hour and a half of the TV show to argue this out.
That's true, but we have to argue it out for another 2 minutes.
Actually, just as another thought to pitch in, I think I saw an interesting thing somewhere about the golden rule. The difference between Christianity and Judaism is that in Christianity, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And in Judaism, the golden rule is don't do unto others as you don't want them to do unto you.
Who cares? I mean, it sounds like Christian propaganda, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Christians like to make this big deal about how we're different than other religions. Oh, they don't say that somebody rose from the dead. It doesn't mean that they're actually right or that their version is better than anybody else's. They just want to point out that they're different. Well,
I could talk about this.
I don't think you have enough time. Well, just real briefly, there's an atheist group in Kansas, which is good news because it proves that they're not all backwards creationist hicks.
We've got atheists in Kansas and Texas now.
Right.
The two least likely places.
By checking, I don't know. It's a Kansas state. Search for it on the internet yourself. And I think we're about out of time. So I want to thank my guests, Keryn Glasser and Ellen Glasser, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
And we're watch the TV show tomorrow. And we'll see you later. Jeff D. will be back next week to talk about his fundamentalist parents. No, not fundamentalist, but very religious.